Every morning you do the same thing without realizing it. You wake up, and before saying a word, before coffee, before checking your phone, you are already doing that thing, that sound, that need to clear your throat that you've been ignoring for years. You've gotten so used to it that you no longer see it as a problem. It's just part of your routine, like brushing your teeth. But it's not normal, it never was. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You have that constant feeling of something stuck in your throat that won't go up or down. After eating, it gets worse. At night, it forces you to cough. In the morning, it's the first thing you feel. You've tried everything: warm water with lemon, cutting out dairy, nasal sprays, antihistamines, and the phlegm always comes back. Because you're looking for the solution in the wrong place. What is generating that phlegm doesn't go away with a spray. It doesn't go away by avoiding milk. It doesn't go away with any pharmacy remedy, because none of those remedies touch the real cause. And the real cause is something you probably ate yesterday, something you eat every week, something your body receives as a silent alarm signal, and to which it always responds the same way, producing more mucus to protect itself. That mechanism has been active inside you for years, and until you know which food triggers it, you'll keep clearing your throat every morning without understanding why. Chronic phlegm is not just an annoyance, it's a signal. Your body is telling you something that no doctor has ever explained to you precisely. Not because they don't want to, because in a 15-minute appointment there is no time for what I'm about to tell you. And here's the part that surprises my patients the most. You probably think you eat pretty well. Maybe you've already eliminated some things. Maybe you take supplements. And yet the phlegm doesn't disappear. The problem is not what you eat in excess. It's something specific that you're putting into your body habitually, and that your immune system has been interpreting as a threat for years. In this video, I tell you exactly what it is, how it acts inside your body, and what you can do to get your throat truly clear again. Stay until the end, because the most important part comes after. My name is Gene Walker. I'm a doctor. I've dedicated a fundamental part of my career to studying the relationship between diet and chronic inflammation of the upper respiratory tract. I've seen hundreds of patients with exactly this story. Years of chronic phlegm, constant throat clearing, persistent discomfort treated with sprays and antihistamines without ever solving the problem at the root. And almost always, when we analyzed their diet in detail, we found the same thing. The same category of foods, the same biological mechanism, the same inflammatory response that no one had ever explained to them clearly. This channel exists to give people the information they deserve. If you're here for the first time, subscribe now and hit the bell. Every week I publish practical health content that your doctor often doesn't have time to explain during a visit. Hit the like button now if you want this information to reach more people. And in the comments, write this right now. How many times a day do you clear your throat? Just a number. Come back and read it in 30 days. It will be different. To understand why this food generates chronic phlegm, we first need to understand how the mucus production mechanism works in the body. And I need to tell you something that most people don't know and that completely changes the way you look at this problem from today on. Mucus is not an enemy, it's a defense system. The mucous membranes lining your throat, your nose, your bronchi produce mucus continuously as a protective barrier against bacteria, viruses and irritants. This process is normal, necessary, essential for the health of the airways. The problem arises when this system gets activated chronically by stimuli that are not bacteria or viruses. Food stimuli, substances that the immune system of the mucosa interprets as potentially dangerous and to which it responds with increased and persistent mucus production. It's not an allergy, it's not a diagnosed intolerance, it's a low-grade inflammatory response that doesn't make enough noise to be diagnosed, but makes enough noise to ruin your mornings for years. This mechanism is called chronic low-grade mucosal inflammation, and it is one of the most widespread and most underestimated problems in modern medicine. Because it doesn't produce symptoms severe enough to be classified as a disease, but it produces enough discomfort to significantly reduce the quality of life of those who suffer from it. The key to this mechanism lies in a group of molecules called histamines and in a process called mast cell degranulation. Every time certain food substances come into contact with the mucosa of your digestive and respiratory tract, they can activate mast cells, immune system cells that release histamine and other pro-inflammatory molecules. This response produces local vasodilation, increased vessel permeability, and above all, increased mucus secretion by the goblet cells of the mucosa. Result: phlegm, continuous, chronic, that doesn't go away with sprays, that doesn't go away with warm water and honey, that doesn't go away because as long as you keep eating what generates it, you keep reactivating the mechanism that produces it. The number one poison for chronic phlegm is refined sugar and the products that contain it in hidden form. I know you've already heard that sugar is bad, but what you've probably never been told is the precise mechanism through which refined sugar generates chronic mucus production in the upper airways. And that mechanism is so direct and so well documented that once you understand it, you can no longer ignore it. Refined sugar, white table sugar, industrial fructose, glucose and fructose syrup, dextrose, maltose, and all the industrial variants of sweeteners found in almost every packaged product, produces in the body a rapid and measurable inflammatory response. Every glycemic spike, every time blood glucose rises quickly, the body responds with a systemic inflammatory cascade that also involves the mucous membranes of the respiratory tract. The first mechanism is the glycation of mucosal proteins. When blood glucose levels are chronically elevated, glucose binds non-enzymatically to proteins in the respiratory mucosa through a process called glycation. These glycated proteins become more viscous, less fluid, harder to eliminate normally. The mucus that forms in the presence of high glycation levels is thicker, stickier, more persistent. It's exactly that type of phlegm you feel in your throat and that you can't clear easily. The second mechanism is the stimulation of pro-inflammatory cytokine production. Refined sugar consumed regularly increases levels of inflammatory molecules like interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha in the blood. These cytokines reach the mucosa of the upper respiratory tract, where they directly stimulate goblet cells to produce more mucus as a defensive response to perceived inflammation. The third mechanism is intestinal dysbiosis. Excess refined sugar significantly alters the composition of the intestinal microbiome, reducing beneficial bacteria and promoting the proliferation of pro-inflammatory bacteria and yeasts. This microbiome imbalance increases intestinal permeability, allowing inflammatory molecules to pass into the blood and reach the mucous membranes throughout the body, including those of the throat and upper airways. These three mechanisms don't work separately. They add up, they amplify each other, they feed each other in a cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to break the longer it remains active. The most serious problem is not the sugar you recognize, it's the one you don't see. Almost no one eats tablespoons of white sugar directly, but almost everyone consumes enormous amounts of hidden sugar every day without knowing it. And this food blindness is the reason why so many people with chronic phlegm can never get rid of it, despite attempts to follow a healthier diet. The first unsuspecting food is industrial sliced bread. A standard packaged bread can contain between 3 and 6 grams of sugar per 100 grams of product. Sugar added in the form of glucose syrup, dextrose or sucrose to improve preservation and flavor. Someone who eats 3 or 4 slices of industrial bread a day is taking in an amount of refined sugar that directly contributes to mucosal inflammation. The second is flavored yogurt. A standard pot of commercial fruit yogurt can contain between 15 and 25 grams of sugar, often in the form of glucose and fructose syrup. It's consumed as a healthy alternative to sweets. In reality, it produces one of the fastest glycemic spikes of the day and a mucosal inflammatory response that manifests in the minutes following consumption in the form of increased sensation of phlegm in the throat. The third is packaged fruit juice, even the one labeled no added sugars. This indication means that sucrose has not been added. It does not mean it contains no sugar. The sugars naturally present in concentrated fruit, stripped of all the fiber that in whole fruit would slow their absorption, produce an extremely rapid glycemic spike. A 200 ml orange juice can contain 20 grams of immediately absorbed sugar. The fourth is ketchup and ready-made sauces. A standard 30-gram portion of ketchup contains approximately 4 grams of sugar. It seems little, but added to all the other hidden sugars consumed throughout the day, it contributes to a total glycemic load much higher than most people calculate. The fifth is commercial oat milk. Many versions on the market contain added sugars, and those without added sugars still have a natural beta-glucan content that converts to sugars during the production process, generating a glycemic index significantly higher than cow's milk. Someone who has eliminated cow's milk to reduce phlegm and replaced it with commercial oat milk, thinking they were making a better choice, may actually be worsening the problem through a different but equally real mechanism. It's not just sugar. There are other foods that contribute to chronic mucus production through different mechanisms that are worth knowing to have a complete picture. Refined gluten present in white bread, regular pasta, and industrial baked goods can, in some people who are neither celiac nor with a diagnosed intolerance, produce an inflammatory mucosal response. This phenomenon, called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, is increasingly documented in medical literature as a cause of chronic symptoms, including precisely increased mucus production in the upper respiratory tract. Refined vegetable oils, particularly sunflower oil, soybean oil, and corn oil, are rich in omega-6 fatty acids in a very high proportion relative to omega-3. This disproportion produces a systemic pro-inflammatory effect that extends to the mucous membranes. Most industrial fried products, packaged snacks, and baked goods contain these oils in significant quantities. Artificial food colorings, particularly tartrazine, identified as E102 on labels, and preservatives like sulfites present in white wine, dried fruit, and many canned products can activate mucosal mast cells, producing a response that mimics an allergic reaction and manifests as increased mucus production. Alcohol, particularly white wines and spirits, produces a vasodilation of the nasal and pharyngeal mucous membranes that temporarily increases mucus production. In people who consume alcohol regularly, this effect becomes part of a condition of chronic low-grade mucosal inflammation. Now I want to tell you what happens in your body when you eliminate these foods. Because realistic expectations are fundamental for maintaining motivation, and for recognizing the signals your body sends you during the process. In the first week, many people notice a temporary worsening of symptoms, more mucus, more throat discomfort, greater congestion. This is normal and has a precise biological explanation. When you eliminate the foods that were chronically stimulating mast cells, these cells go through a destabilization phase during which they release their last reserves of accumulated inflammatory molecules. This phenomenon is transitory and generally lasts between 3 and 7 days. Between the 7th and 14th day, most people begin to notice a reduction in the morning sensation of phlegm in the throat. Waking up becomes less dominated by the need to clear your throat. The sensation of pressure at the back of the throat diminishes. It's not yet complete, but it's perceptible and motivating enough to want to continue. Between the 2nd and 4th week, the improvements become more stable and more evident. Mucus production decreases significantly during the day. The sensation of a clear throat becomes the norm rather than the exception. Many people also report improvements in sleep quality, morning mental clarity, and a general reduction in the feeling of heaviness after meals. After 2 or 3 months of consistent elimination of problematic foods, the mucosa has had time to reduce the baseline chronic inflammation that had accumulated over the years. At this point, many people discover they can occasionally reintroduce some of the eliminated foods without reproducing the chronic symptoms, because the mucosal immune system is no longer in a state of permanent alert. Now, let me tell you what you can do concretely starting today, not next week. Today. The first step is to read the labels of all the packaged products you consume habitually. Look for any word ending in "ose" – glucose, fructose, sucrose, maltose, dextrose. Every word ending in "ose" is a sugar. If you find more than one among the first 5 ingredients, that product is one of your main contributors to chronic phlegm. The second step is to substitute high glycemic index foods with alternatives that don't produce glucose spikes. Instead of industrial sliced bread, real whole grain bread with whole wheat flour as the first ingredient, ideally naturally leavened. Instead of commercial fruit yogurt, plain Greek yogurt without added sugars with fresh fruit that you add yourself. Instead of packaged juice, whole fruit with all the fiber that slows sugar absorption. The third step is to increase consumption of foods with anti-inflammatory properties specific to the respiratory tract. Fresh ginger contains gingerols and shogaols, compounds with documented anti-inflammatory and mucolytic properties. Turmeric contains curcumin, one of the most studied natural compounds for its systemic anti-inflammatory action. Garlic contains allicin with antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. Extra virgin olive oil contains oleocanthal, a compound with anti-inflammatory properties similar to those of ibuprofen. These foods are not miracle remedies. They are concrete tools that work every day in the opposite direction to what refined sugar does every day. The fourth step is to replace refined vegetable oils with extra virgin olive oil and clarified butter for cooking, 2 fat sources with a much more favorable inflammatory profile than industrial seed oils. The fifth step is to reduce alcohol to no more than 1 glass of red wine per day, preferring organic red wine without added sulfites, which has a significantly lower impact on the mucosa than white wine and spirits. Let me answer directly the objections I already know you're thinking, because I hear them every day. The first is, but I already eliminated dairy and the phlegm didn't improve. This is one of the most common mistakes. Eliminating cow's milk and replacing it with commercial oat milk, drinking fruit juice, convinced you're making a healthy choice, continuing to eat industrial bread and fruit yogurt is not eliminating the problematic foods. It's shifting the problem from one food to another in the same category. The elimination must cover the entire category of high glycemic load foods and products containing hidden sugars, not just cow's milk. The second is, my doctor never told me these things. That's true, and the reason is not bad faith. It's that the healthcare system is structured to treat diagnosable diseases, not to prevent and correct conditions of subclinical chronic inflammation that don't fit standard diagnostic criteria. Chronic phlegm doesn't have a disease code that justifies an appointment dedicated to dietary analysis. And so it gets treated with sprays and antihistamines that attenuate the symptom without touching the cause. The third is, I've already had allergy tests and they came back negative. Standard allergy tests look for IgE-mediated allergies, the ones with immediate and intense reactions. The chronic mucosal inflammatory response produced by refined sugars and pro-inflammatory foods is not IgE-mediated. You won't find it in standard allergy tests. It doesn't show up in routine blood work. It exists and produces real symptoms, but is not detected by conventional diagnostic tools. This is one of the reasons why many people continue to suffer from chronic phlegm for years without ever receiving a satisfactory answer from the traditional medical pathway. We've reached the end of this video, and as always, I want to leave you with something concrete to do in the next few hours, not the next few months. Go to your kitchen now. Pick up the 5 packaged products you consume most frequently. Read the labels. Look for words ending in "os" in the ingredients list. Count how many of the 5 contain at least one among the first 5 ingredients. Then write that number in the comments below. How many out of 5? That number will tell you how much hidden sugar load you are carrying into your body every day and how much chronic mucosal inflammation you are feeding without knowing it. If this video gave you something useful, share it with someone you care about who has been clearing their throat every morning for years, convinced it's normal. It's not normal, and now you know why. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and hit the bell. The next video will talk about the foods that reduce chronic phlegm in the first 2 weeks, and some of them will surprise you for how simple and accessible they are. I'm Dr. Gene Walker. Your body doesn't produce chronic phlegm as punishment. It produces it because something you eat every day is telling it to. Stop giving it that thing. Start today.